No one can replace her, Xavier Blake declared, his voice cutting through the tension in the mansion's foyer as he stormed in, eyes blazing, to defend Olivia Carter from a venomous attack. Welcome, listeners, to a story where a contract sparks a love that defies all odds. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop your city in the comments and let us know. Do you think a fake engagement can turn into true love, or will it crumble under pressure? Hit that subscribe button to catch our latest heart-pounding stories, and don't miss a single twist. Will Olivia, a radiant black woman with a heart of gold, find forever with billionaire Xavier, or will his past tear them apart? Smash that like button, share your predictions below, and stick with us to uncover a love story that'll keep you guessing until the very end. The air in Blake's bistro buzzed with the clink of crystal glasses and the low hum of Chicago's elite. Their voices weaving through the candlelit dining room like threads in a tapestry of wealth. Olivia Carter moved through it all with a grace that belied her exhaustion, her long, glossy black hair swaying as she balanced a tray of steaming lobster bisque and seared scallops. At 27, she was a vision, her deep brown eyes warm, her skin glowing like polished mahogany under the soft lights. But beauty was a currency she couldn't spend, not when every tip she earned was a lifeline for her father, whose heart was failing faster than her hope could keep up. Olivia had been at the bistro for 2 years, serving patrons who rarely met. Her gaze. The restaurant, perched on the edge of the magnificent mile, was a jewel in the crown of Xavier Blake, a 34-year-old billionaire whose name was etched into the city's skyline. Blake Enterprises owned half of Chicago's luxury scene: hotels, restaurants, tech startups, and Xavier ran it all with a precision that bordered on obsession. Tonight, he sat in a private booth, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room, a glass of untouched bourbon in his hand. His charcoal suit was impeccable, but the faint scar along his jaw hinted at a past he kept buried. Olivia didn't notice him watching as she navigated the chaos of the dinner rush. Her shift had started at 4 p.m., after a morning spent at the hospital, holding her father's hand as he slept, his breathing shallow, the beeping monitors a cruel metronome. The bills were piling up, $50,000 for a surgery that might save him, with insurance covering nothing. Every plate she served, every smile she forced, was a step toward keeping him alive. But the weight of it was crushing her, and in quiet moments she dreamed of a life where she could breathe, maybe even paint again, her canvases gathering dust in her tiny Bronzeville apartment. The night took a turn when a new waiter, a nervous kid named Jamal, fumbled a bottle of Cabernet, splashing crimson across the crisp white shirt of a hedge fund manager. The man's face turned beet red, his voice rising like a storm. "Do you have any idea who I am?" he bellowed, jabbing a finger at Jamal, who shrank back, his apron stained, his eyes wide with panic. The dining room hushed, heads turning, phones discreetly raised to capture the drama. Olivia was at the table in seconds, her voice a calm anchor in the chaos. "Sir, I'm so sorry for the mistake," she said, her smile warm but unwavering. "Let me replace your drink on the house, and we'll cover the cleaning for your shirt. Can I get you anything else to make this right?" Her tone was velvet over steel, disarming the man's fury. He blinked, then muttered something about the steak being overcooked, but the fire in his eyes dimmed. She remade his order herself, ensuring every detail was perfect, and by the time she returned with a fresh glass of wine, he was laughing with his companions, the incident forgotten. Jamal mouthed a shaky thank you as she passed, and she squeezed his shoulder, whispering, "You've got this." From his booth, Xavier watched it all, his fingers tightening around his glass. He'd seen countless servers crumble under pressure, but Olivia was different. She didn't just diffuse the situation, she turned it into a moment of connection, her kindness genuine, not performative. It was exactly what he needed. His grandfather's will was a noose around his neck: marry within 6 months or lose control of Blake Enterprises to his cousin, a man who'd squander the family legacy on bad investments and worse decisions. Xavier had no time for love, not since Lauren, his ex-fiancée, walked away 3 years ago, unable to handle the man he'd become, after a car accident left him scarred, both physically and emotionally. But Olivia, she was the answer to his problem. The next morning, Olivia was called to Xavier's office on the 50th floor of Blake Tower, a glass monolith that seemed to pierce the clouds. The elevator ride felt endless, her reflection staring. Back from the mirrored walls, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to the opulence around her. She smoothed her hair, nerves prickling. Was she being fired? Had the guest complained after all? Xavier's office was a cathedral of wealth, mahogany, desk, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Lake Michigan. A view that made her feel small. He stood as she entered, his 6'2" frame commanding the space, his dark hair slightly tousled, as if he'd run his hands through it during a long night. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice low and measured. "I have a proposition." She stood frozen, clutching her purse. "A proposition?" He slid a contract across the desk, 5 pages of dense legal text. "I need a fiancé for 6 months," he said, not looking up. "A business arrangement. You'd live in my mansion, attend events, and convince the world we're engaged. Nothing physical, just a performance. In return, $100,000. Olivia's breath caught. The number was a lifeline, her father's surgery paid in full. But the weight of it was staggering. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Xavier met her eyes, his gaze piercing. "Last night you handled that guest with a grace I've never seen. You didn't break, didn't fake it. You were real. I need someone believable, someone with heart. That's you." Her mind raced. $100,000 could save her father, keep a roof over their heads, maybe even give her a chance to paint again. But this was no fairy tale. Xavier Blake was a man who lived in a world of power and privilege, a world she didn't belong in. She thought of her father's tired smile, the way he'd taught her to hold her head high no matter what. She thought of the hospital bills, the relentless calls from collectors. Her hands trembled as she reached for the pen. "Is it legal?" she asked, scanning the contract. "Completely," Xavier replied. "My lawyers drafted it, 6 months, then you walk away with the money free and clear." She hesitated, the pen hovering over the page. This was a line she couldn't uncross, a deal that felt like selling a piece of herself. But her father's life was worth more than her pride. She signed her name, Olivia Carter, in a steady, deliberate script, sealing her fate. Xavier nodded, his expression unreadable. "We start tomorrow. A car will pick you up at 8 a.m. to move you to the mansion." He stood, extending a hand. "Welcome to the arrangement, Miss Carter." She shook his hand, his grip firm but warm, and for a fleeting moment she wondered, what kind of man hid behind those guarded eyes? As she left the office, the city sprawling below, she felt like she was stepping off a cliff, with no idea where she'd land. The elevator doors parted with a soft chime, revealing Xavier Blake's Lake Forest mansion, a world of marble and gold that made Olivia Carter's single suitcase look like an intruder. At 27, she was a striking black woman, her long, glossy hair cascading down her back, her presence radiant despite the weight of her new reality. The contract was signed. 6 months as Xavier's fake fiancé for $100,000 to save her father's life, but stepping into this opulent universe felt like crossing into a foreign land. The foyer alone was larger than her Bronzeville apartment, with a chandelier dripping crystals that caught the morning light, casting rainbows across the polished floor. Olivia's sneakers squeaked faintly, a stark contrast to the silence of wealth. Xavier greeted her with a curt nod, his charcoal suit as impeccable as ever, his blue eyes betraying nothing. "Your room is down the hall," he said, handing her a leather folder embossed with his initials. "Schedules, rules, expectations. Your stylist comes tomorrow at 9 a.m. Our first event is Friday, a charity gala. Any questions?" His tone was all business, as if she were a new employee, not a woman pretending to be his future wife. Olivia clutched the folder, her fingers brushing the soft leather. "Do you ever live here?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "Or is this just a stage for your life?" He paused, his jaw tightening, as if no one had dared ask him something so personal. "I live here," he said quietly, but his voice carried a hollowness that suggested existing and living were not the same. He turned and walked away, leaving her to navigate the mansion's labyrinthine halls alone. Her room was a dream: silk drapes, a four-poster bed, a balcony overlooking Lake Michigan's shimmering expanse. But Olivia couldn't shake her instincts. By noon, she was in the kitchen, a sterile space of stainless steel and untouched appliances, wiping down counters and humming a gospel tune her father used to sing. The staff, George the butler, Maria the housekeeper, and a handful of maids, watched with curious smiles. "Miss Olivia, you don't need to clean," Maria said, her accent warm. "You're the lady of the house now." "I'm just the fake lady," Olivia replied with a laugh, but she kept scrubbing. It was her way of grounding herself in a place that felt like a museum. That evening, she couldn't resist the kitchen's potential. She pulled ingredients from the pantry: collard greens, cornmeal, chicken, and began cooking. The aroma of her grandmother's recipes filled the air, a rebellion against the mansion's cold perfection. George peeked in, his stoic face softening. "Smells like my mama's kitchen," he said. And Olivia grinned, handing him a spoonful of greens to taste. Xavier came home early, drawn by the unfamiliar scent wafting through the house. He stood in the kitchen doorway, tie loosened, his expression a mix of curiosity and surprise. "What's this?" he asked, eyeing the golden chew, cornbread and sizzling pork chops on the counter. "Dinner," Olivia said, wiping her hands on a towel. "You look like you could use a real meal." She set a plate before him at the kitchen island, a far cry from the dining room's 12-seat mahogany table. He hesitated, then took a bite. His eyes closed briefly, a flicker of delight breaking through his guarded demeanor. "This is, incredible," he said, almost to himself. "I haven't eaten like this since I was a kid." They ate together, the island a small oasis in the mansion's vastness. Olivia shared a story of her childhood, sneaking extra cornbread from her grandmother's table, and Xavier chuckled, a rare sound that warmed the room. He countered with a tale of stealing cookies from his grandmother's jar, dodging her playful swats. For a moment, the contract felt distant, and the kitchen became a place where two people could simply be. The staff lingered nearby, exchanging glances. "Miss Olivia's good for him," Maria whispered to George, who nodded, his eyes crinkling. The days that followed were a crash course in Xavier's world. The stylist arrived, transforming Olivia with tailored dresses and heels that made her feel like an imposter. She studied the folder's rules: which entrance to use to avoid paparazzi, how to hold Xavier's arm at events, what to say if asked about their romance. The staff treated her with polite confusion, whispering in Spanish, assuming she couldn't understand. But Olivia, fluent thanks to her grandmother, caught every word. "She's not what we expected, but she's kind." She smiled to herself, letting them wonder. Xavier was a ghost in his own home, leaving before dawn for board meetings and returning after midnight. When their paths crossed, he was polite but distant, his focus on the empire he was fighting to keep. Yet Olivia noticed the way he paused in the common areas, his eyes lingering on small things she left behind. A dog-eared poetry book on the coffee table, a sketch of Lake Michigan she'd doodled on a napkin. She was testing the boundaries of their arrangement, leaving pieces of herself in his sterile world, hoping to see if he'd notice. The hardest part wasn't the luxury or the pretending. It was Xavier's loneliness, a mirror to her own. Late one night, she found him in the study staring out at the city lights, a glass of bourbon untouched. "Long day?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Always," he replied, not turning. But he didn't dismiss her, and she stepped closer, her voice soft. "You don't have to carry it all alone, you know." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. But something shifted in the air, a crack in his armor, too small to name but too real to ignore. The staff began to love her, not just for her warmth but for the life she brought to the mansion. George started calling her Miss Olivia with a twinkle in his eye, and Maria shared recipes, their laughter echoing through the halls. One afternoon, Olivia caught Xavier watching from the staircase as she taught Maria a dance move from her childhood, their giggles filling the foyer. His lips twitched, almost a smile, before he turned away. As the week ended, Olivia stood on her balcony, the lake a silver ribbon under the moon. She was playing a role, but the lines were blurring. Xavier's world was vast and cold, but in the small moments, shared meals, fleeting glances, she felt something stir, something dangerous. The contract promised money, not feelings, yet her heart was starting to forget the difference. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer her father taught her, hoping it would anchor her in the days to come. The chandelier in the grand ballroom of the Chicago Art Institute cast a golden glow over the charity gala, where Chicago's elite mingled in a sea of tuxedos and sequined gowns. Olivia Carter, radiant in a sapphire dress that hugged her curves, moved through the crowd on Xavier Blake's arm, her long, glossy black hair cascading over her shoulders. 3 months into their fake engagement, she'd mastered the art of smiling for cameras and dodging probing questions about their whirlwind romance. But tonight, as Xavier's hand rested lightly on her back, guiding her through the throng, the warmth of his touch felt less like an act and more like a promise. Neither dared name. The contract was clear. 6 months, $100,000, no strings. But the lines were blurring and Olivia's heart was caught in the crossfire. The gala was a high-stakes performance, with Xavier's board members and investors watching their every move. He leaned close, his breath brushing her ear. "You're doing great," he murmured, his voice low and steady. "Just keep smiling." Olivia nodded, her pulse quickening, not from the crowd but from the way his eyes lingered on hers a moment too long. She caught whispers from the guests, speculation, about the coffee shop girl who'd snagged a billionaire, but Xavier's presence anchored her. When a silver-haired CEO made a snide remark about her humble beginnings, Xavier's grip tightened, his voice cutting like a blade. "Olivia's authenticity is worth more than your portfolio, Charles." The man flushed, and Olivia's chest warmed, not just from the defense but from the pride in Xavier's tone. Their dance was the night's centerpiece, a waltz under the glittering lights. As the orchestra played, Xavier pulled her close, his hand firm at her waist. "You're a natural," he said, his lips curving into a rare smile. Olivia's laugh was soft, genuine. "You're not so bad yourself." For a moment, the world faded, the cameras, the whispers, the contract, and it was just them, swaying to a melody that felt like theirs alone. Her heart pounded, a dangerous rhythm warning her that this was no longer just a job. But she pushed the thought away, focusing on the steps, on the role she was paid to play. Back at the mansion, their routine resumed, but the gala had shifted something. Late-night talks became their secret ritual, born from sleepless nights in a house too big for two. Olivia would wander to the kitchen for chamomile tea, her bare feet soft on the marble, and find Xavier at the island, his laptop open, coffee, cold. "Insomnia?" she'd ask, settling across from him. "Something like that," he'd reply, but he never closed his laptop and left. Instead, they talked about her childhood painting murals on Bronzeville walls, about his summers at his grandfather's cabin, before wealth and grief hardened him. One night he admitted, "I used to love stargazing, haven't done it in years." Olivia smiled, tucking that detail away, a piece of the man behind the billionaire. She began leaving traces of herself in his world. A poetry book dog-eared with her favorite lines, a sketch of the lake pinned to the fridge. Xavier never commented, but she caught him pausing to study them, his fingers tracing her pencil strokes. She, in turn, noticed his small gestures, a cup of coffee left on her nightstand, brewed with cream and 1 sugar, just as she liked it. "How'd you know?" she asked once, holding the mug. He shrugged, a faint flush on his cheeks. "I pay attention." The staff saw it too. "He's different with you, Miss Olivia," George the butler said, his eyes twinkling, like he's remembering how to live. But the illusion of their growing bond shattered on a crisp October afternoon. Olivia was arranging sunflowers in the foyer, their bright petals a nod to her father's favorite flower, when the front door swung open. Lauren Mitchell, Xavier's ex-fiancée, swept in like a storm, her blonde hair sleek, her designer coat screaming Paris couture. Xavier was at a board meeting, leaving Olivia alone with the woman who'd once held his heart. Lauren's green eyes raked over Olivia, her lips curling into a sneer. "So, you're the help playing dress-up," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Xavier's slumming it, but he'll come back to his kind. Pack your bags. Olivia's stomach twisted, the words cutting deeper than she'd expected. 3 months ago, she would have brushed it off, but now, with her heart tangled in feelings she hadn't planned for, Lauren's presence was a cold splash of reality. The contract was nearing its end, and Xavier's world, his real world, was one of wealth and privilege she could never fully inhabit. She loved him, she realized, but love wasn't enough when their lives were oceans apart. "It's just a business deal," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "When it's over, I'll leave. You can have him back." Lauren laughed, tossing her hair. "You're not even in his league. A barista? Really?" She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the marble. "Xavier needs someone who understands his world, not some charity case he's indulging." Olivia's hands clenched, but she kept her composure, the same grace she'd shown at the bistro. "I'm here because he chose me," she said, her voice low. "Not you." But doubt gnawed at her. Was she just a placeholder, a convenient solution until someone like Lauren returned? The contract's end loomed, and with it, the life she'd glimpsed with Xavier, a life she was starting to want. Unseen, George lingered in the hallway, his face tight with disapproval. He slipped away, pulling out his phone to call Xavier. "Sir, you need to come home," he said, his voice urgent. "Miss Lauren's here, and she's upsetting Miss Olivia." In the boardroom, Xavier's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening at George's name. "Excuse me," he told the board, his voice clipped, and stepped into the hall. George's brief explanation sent a surge of anger through him, not at Olivia, but at the thought of Lauren tearing into her. He grabbed his coat, barking at his assistant to postpone the meeting. The Bentley's engine roared as he sped toward the mansion, his mind racing. Olivia wasn't just a contract to him anymore. She was the woman who'd made his house feel like a home, who'd cracked open his guarded heart. He couldn't let Lauren's venom destroy what they'd built, even if he hadn't yet found the courage to name it. Back in the foyer, Olivia stood her ground, but her resolve was fraying. Lauren's words echoed her deepest fears, that she was an outsider, that Xavier's feelings were a fleeting illusion. The clock on the mantel ticked, each second a reminder that their time was running out. She opened her mouth to say more, to tell Lauren the contract's end would set her free, but the sound of tires screeching in the driveway stopped her. The front door burst open, and Xavier's silhouette filled the frame, his eyes blazing with a fury Olivia had never seen. The foyer of Xavier Blake's Lake Forest mansion crackled with tension, the air thick as Lauren Mitchell's venomous words hanging between her and Olivia Carter. Lauren's green eyes gleamed with triumph, her blonde hair catching the chandelier's light as she sneered. "You're not his equal, Xavier. A barista playing fiancé? It's pathetic." Olivia stood frozen, her long, glossy black hair, framing a face that held both strength and heartbreak. The contract that had brought her here, 6 months as Xavier's fake fiancé for $100,000 to save her father, was unraveling, and with it, the fragile hope she'd dared to nurture. She loved Xavier, but Lauren's presence, dripping with privilege and history, made that love feel like a reckless dream. Before Olivia could respond, the front door slammed open, and Xavier stormed in, his blue eyes blazing with a fury that silenced the room. His charcoal suit was slightly rumpled, his tie askew from the rushed drive from downtown Chicago. The tires of his Bentley still smoked in the driveway, a testament to the urgency George's call had sparked. The butler, ever loyal, stood in the shadows, his face tight with satisfaction as he watched his employer take command. "Enough, Lauren," Xavier said, his voice low and dangerous, cutting through her tirade like a blade. He stepped between the two women, his broad shoulders a shield for Olivia. "Olivia is more than my equal. She's made this house a home, something you never could. She's kind, resilient, and worth more than your petty insults or your entire trust fund." Lauren's mouth parted, her confidence faltering as Xavier's words landed like blows. Olivia's breath caught, her heart pounding. She'd seen Xavier in boardrooms, commanding attention with quiet authority. But this was different. This was personal, raw. His defense wasn't part of the script they'd rehearsed for their fake engagement. It felt real, and that terrified her. "Xavier, you can't mean that," Lauren said, her voice softening, a calculated shift to vulnerability. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm with a familiarity that made Olivia's stomach twist. "We were good together. I made a mistake leaving, but I'm here now. I know your world. Our world. She doesn't belong in it." Olivia's hands clenched, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to speak, to tell Lauren the contract was just business, that she'd leave when it ended. But the words stuck in her throat. She loved Xavier, had fallen for him over shared meals, late-night talks, and the way he'd started leaving coffee for her, brewed just the way she liked it. But Lauren's words echoed her deepest fear. She was an outsider, a temporary fixture, in a world of wealth she'd never truly understand. Xavier's gaze flicked to Olivia, and what she saw in his eyes stole her breath. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only a fierce certainty. He turned back to Lauren, his voice deadly quiet. "You left me when I needed you most, Lauren. You walked away because you couldn't handle my scars." Olivia stayed. She saw me, not the billionaire, not the empire. Her. The room seemed to hold its breath. The staff, peeking from the hallway, exchanged wide-eyed glances, their whispers hushed. Lauren's face twisted, her composure cracking. "You're throwing away everything we had for her," she spat, gesturing at Olivia as if she were an object. "There's nothing to throw away," Xavier said, his tone final. "You're my past. Olivia is my future." He turned to Olivia, his expression softening, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "I love you, Olivia. Not for a contract, not for appearances, but for real. For the way you make me laugh, for the way you make this empty house feel alive." Olivia's heart stopped, then raced. The words she'd dreamed of, feared, hung in the air. Before she could process them, Xavier closed the distance between them, his hands cupping her face. He kissed her, a fierce, desperate kiss that poured every unspoken feeling into her. It wasn't the polite pecks they'd staged for cameras at galas. This was raw, undeniable, a declaration that drowned out Lauren's presence. Olivia's hands found his chest, her fingers curling into his suit as she kissed him back, her fear melting under the heat of his certainty. The staff stifled cheers, Maria clutching George's arm, their faces alight with joy. Lauren's heels clicked sharply as she stormed out, her exit a whirlwind of wounded pride. The door slammed and the mansion fell silent, save for the faint hum of the chandelier's crystals. Olivia pulled back, her breath uneven, her eyes searching Xavier's. "You love me?" she whispered, her voice trembling with hope and disbelief. He nodded, his thumb brushing her cheek. "I've been falling for you since that first night in the kitchen, when you made me cornbread and made me laugh. I was too stubborn to admit it, too scared to believe I could feel this again." His voice cracked, a rare vulnerability from a man who'd built walls higher than his skyscrapers. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but she laughed, a soft, shaky sound. "I thought I was just a contract to you. I thought I wasn't enough." "You're everything," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You've shown me what it means to live, not just exist. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." The moment hung between them, fragile and perfect. But the day wasn't over. That evening, Xavier transformed the mansion's terrace into a candlelit haven. A small table held dishes they'd cooked together, Olivia's collard greens, his clumsy attempt at cornbread, golden and slightly lopsided. Jazz drifted from hidden speakers and the lake sparkled under the twilight. They sat, their hands brushing as they passed plates, their laughter easy. Xavier was different tonight, nervous, almost boyish, his usual composure softened. "I owe you an apology," he said, setting down his glass. "I let this contract define us for too long. I should have told you sooner how I felt, how you've changed me." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a velvet box. Olivia's breath hitched as he opened it, revealing a $3 million diamond ring, its facets catching the candlelight like captured stars. He knelt, his eyes locked on hers. "Olivia Carter, you've shown me what love means. Will you marry me? Not for a contract, not for my family's empire, but forever?" Tears streamed down her face, but her smile was radiant. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking with joy. Yes, Xavier. He slipped the ring onto her finger, its weight a promise, not a burden. They kissed again, slower this time, the world narrowing to just them, the contract forgotten. As they sat, hands intertwined, the city lights twinkling beyond the lake, Olivia felt a certainty she hadn't known was possible. She'd entered this mansion as a stranger, but now she was home, not because of the marble or the chandeliers, but because of the man beside her, who'd chosen her against all odds. The morning sun spilled over Chicago's skyline, painting the Lake Forest mansion in hues of gold and amber. Olivia Carter stood on the balcony of her room, the $3 million diamond ring on her finger catching the light like a captured dawn. The weight of Xavier Blake's proposal, real, not bound by contracts or inheritances, still thrummed in her chest. Last night's candlelit confession on the terrace, where they'd laughed over lopsided cornbread and sealed their love with a kiss, felt like a dream she was afraid to wake from. Her long, glossy black hair danced in the breeze, and at 27 she stood on the cusp of a life she'd never dared imagine. But the path to forever wasn't a straight line, and the echoes of their past still lingered, testing the love they'd fought to claim. 6 months after that fateful night, Olivia and Xavier's wedding unfolded in the heart of Bronzeville, her old neighborhood, where the air buzzed with soul and celebration. The community center, a modest brick building with chipped paint, was transformed into a vibrant haven. Strings of fairy lights draped the ceiling, and tables groaned under platters of fried chicken, collard greens, and peach cobbler. Recipes from Olivia's grandmother, prepared by neighbors who'd known her since she was a girl. The mural on the center's wall, painted by local artists, depicted Chicago's skyline interwoven with sunflowers, a nod to her father's favorite flower. Olivia's heart swelled. This was her world, and Xavier had chosen to step into it. Father James stood tall despite his frail frame. His heart condition stabilized thanks to the surgery Xavier had quietly funded. He walked her down the aisle, his eyes glistening as he whispered, "You're my masterpiece, Liv." Her dress, a simple ivory gown with lace that hugged her curves, was a far cry from the gala gowns she'd worn for show. It was chosen for her, not the cameras, and when Xavier saw her, his breath caught. In a tailored black suit, his blue eyes softened, and a smile broke across his face, unguarded and radiant. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice thick as they stood before a crowd of family, friends, and neighbors. The ceremony was simple but alive with love. George, the butler who'd become Olivia's confidant, read a poem about resilience, his deep voice trembling with pride. Maria, the housekeeper, dabbed tears as she handed out sunflowers to guests. Xavier's vows were steady, each word deliberate. "Olivia, you taught me that home isn't a place. It's you. I promise to choose you every day, to build a life where you never doubt you're enough." Olivia's voice wavered as she spoke. "Xavier, you saw me when I felt invisible. I promise to love you, to remind you who you are when the world tries to forget." When they kissed, the crowd erupted, clapping and whistling, the joy infectious. The reception was a riot of music and laughter. A boombox blared Stevie Wonder and Aretha Franklin, and kids danced alongside elders. Xavier, usually so composed, spun Olivia on the makeshift dance floor, his laughter mingling with hers as they tripped over each other's feet. Her father joined them, his steps slow but determined, and Xavier clasped his hand, a silent bond forming. The cake, baked by the corner bakery, was lopsided but perfect, its vanilla layers smeared with frosting flowers. As they cut it, Xavier smeared a bit on Olivia's nose, and her giggle echoed, a sound that made his heart ache with joy. A year later, their son Elijah was born, a bright-eyed boy with his mother's warm brown eyes and a dimple that hinted at Xavier's rare smile. The mansion, once a cold monument to wealth, was now a home filled with life. Olivia's paintings adorned the walls, vibrant scenes of Bronzeville, the lake, and sunflowers, each a piece of her soul. Xavier had built her a studio off the garden, its skylights flooding the space with natural light. She painted there daily, her brushes dancing across canvases, while Elijah napped in a bassinet nearby. One afternoon, as spring bloomed, Olivia stood in the garden watching Xavier play with Elijah. He held the boy aloft, pretending he was an airplane, his deep laughter blending with Elijah's squeals. Olivia's heart swelled. This was the man who'd once lived like a ghost in his own home, now vibrant and present. She joined them, scooping Elijah into her arms, and Xavier wrapped them both in a hug. "I never thought I could have this," he murmured against her hair. "You gave me a family, Olivia." She smiled, kissing his cheek. "We gave each other a family." They sat on the grass, Elijah babbling between them, and Olivia thought of the contract that had started it all, a desperate deal that became a love she'd never dared dream of. The mansion's marble and gold no longer felt foreign. It was theirs, shaped by shared meals, late-night talks, and the courage to choose each other. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the lake, Olivia realized love wasn't about erasing differences or escaping the past. It was about building something new, together, every day. She looked at Xavier, his hand intertwined with hers, and knew they'd crossed the bridge she'd once feared to tread. Their story, born in a world apart, was now a testament to love's power to rewrite the rules. What a journey Olivia and Xavier took us on, from a contract born of necessity to a love that defied all odds. Thank you for joining us for this heartwarming tale of courage and connection. What did you think? Can love truly bloom from the most unexpected beginnings? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and tell us where you're listening from. Smash that like button if their story touched your heart, and subscribe to catch our next unforgettable love story. Your support keeps these tales alive, so share this with someone who believes in second chances. Until next time, keep choosing love, and we'll see you soon.